J'ouvre maintenant cette séance. Bienvenue dans la réunion numéro...
I call this meeting to order. Welcome to the next meeting of the Transport Committee pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on February 14th, 2023 and Thursday, May 4th, 2023. The committee is meeting to discuss its study of the role of McKinsey & Company in the creation of the beginnings of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of Thursday, June 23rd, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room or remotely using Zoom.
Wish to inform the committee that all witnesses have been sound tested for the benefit of our interpreters and have passed the sound test. Committee members appearing before us today, we have, as an individual, the Honourable Bill Morneau, former Minister of Finance, joining us by video conference. Welcome, Mr. Morneau. As an individual, we have Ms. Janice Fukakusa, inaugural board chair of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. Welcome. As an individual, we have Dominic Barton, former global managing director of McKinsey & Company, joining by video conference. Thank you very much for being here. And from the Canada Infrastructure Bank, we have Mr. Bruno Guillemette, former interim chief investment officer, once again joining us by video conference. We will begin today with opening remarks, and I will turn the floor over now to you, Mr. Morneau. You have 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to start by saying it's a pleasure to be here with all of you in a virtual format. Bonjour, c'est un plaisir d'être avec.
Good morning, pleased to be with you remotely to speak about the Infrastructure Bank of Canada.
To be able to talk a little bit about the Canada Infrastructure Bank this morning. And in particular, happy to have the opportunity to talk about the importance of infrastructure investment in our country. As you may know, my interest in this topic goes back a long way. As far back as 2012, I led a project for the Ontario government to look at how pension funds could be brought together that were not already in a large public sector pension fund to increase their opportunities to invest. And in particular, one of the objectives was to be able to invest.
My apologies to you, Mr. Morneau. We're having some complications with our translation. So if you could, we're going to ask you perhaps to go last, and we'll ask the other members to go before you. Does that work for you, Mr. Morneau?
Fine.
Thank you very much. My apologies once again. We'll turn the floor over now to Ms. Fukakusa. Ms. Fukakusa, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. My name is Janice Fukakusa. I served as board chair of the Canada Infrastructure Bank from July 2017 until April 2020. I'll be speaking in a personal capacity and referring to the Canada Infrastructure Bank as CIB for ease of reference. I accepted this invitation to speak to this committee because I know that Canada's infrastructure deficit is vitally important and for our own productivity in Canada, as well as our quality of life. Canadians have every right to ask questions about the government's plan to address this deficit in a way that's efficient, sustainable, and transparent. In my view, the CIB plays an important role in that plan. As the members of the committee know, the concept of the CIB was introduced to the Canadian public in the 2015 Liberal platform. The idea is a very important one, but it wasn't unique to Canada. Similar models worked very well in the UK and Australia. In 2016, the government announced the creation of CIB in its fall economic statement. The proposal was studied in pre-budget consultations and passed through the Canada Infrastructure Bank Act in June 2017. Around the same time, I was moving towards a new phase in my career. In January of 2017, I retired as the Chief Financial Officer and Chief Administrative Officer of Royal Bank of Canada after 31 years with the bank and was looking for new ways to give back. While I've been fortunate in contributing meaningfully to various charitable organizations, I never had the opportunity to work directly with government in a day-to-day role. I applied for the position of inaugural board chair and was honored to be offered the job in July 2017. Much of my early days as chair were focused on standing up the CIB and ensuring that it had governance, talent, and operating structure to deliver its mandate. Much of the time, I worked with a committee comprised of government representatives from infrastructure, finance, and other departments to hire a board of directors and played a hands-on role on CIB's initial risk management, establishment of investment processes, and procurement guidelines. Before I hired the CIB staff and we got everyone together, I received support from the Infrastructure and Communities Canada Department, in particular the CIB Transition Office. My principal contact there was Assistant Deputy Minister Glenn Campbell. Given that this idea was novel to Canada, we knew that it would require outside analysis. We approached McKinsey and Company, the Boston Consulting Group, and PricewaterhouseCoopers on the strength of McKinsey's infrastructure advice and practice. The firm was awarded 2 contracts to provide advice on investment criteria, awarded in January 2018, risk management advice, awarded in March 2018. Both contracts complied with the CIB procurement policy and amounted to a total of $940,000. McKinsey was not contacted to offer advice on specific projects, and I would not have accepted such advice. Following the recruitment of Annie Ropar as CFO and Pierre Lavallée as President and CEO in June 2018, my role shifted primarily to board governance activities. Sadly, Pierre passed away earlier this year after a battle with cancer, and I want to just take this moment to recognize his valuable contributions to CIB and his insights and professionalism in working with us. He did an outstanding job laying the groundwork for success. I stepped down from the role in April 2020 following the conclusion of my term so that I could focus on other commitments in the not-for-profit and private sectors. I'm very proud of our board's work in standing up CIB so that it would be positioned to support Canada's 21st century infrastructure needs, and left the organization with full confidence that the team could build on this work. I recognize that many questions have been raised about CIB's effectiveness and efficiencies in the current context. I'm not adequately up to speed with the current operations to answer those questions. I would only say that I continue to support the mandate and believe it has great potential to accelerate the pace of private infrastructure investments in Canada. And I'd be happy to answer any questions from this committee as my work as board chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fukakusa. Next, we have Mr. Barton. Mr. Barton, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope you can hear me okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate you inviting me today. At the outset, I want to emphasize that I'm appearing as a private citizen on my own behalf. I'm not here as a representative of McKinsey, and obviously I don't speak for the Government of Canada. In January, I had the opportunity to speak to the Government Operations Committee on these same issues, and I do not propose to repeat today everything that I said there, but I'm happy to answer your questions. As I noted to Ogo, I'm not a partisan, I'm not a member or supporter of any political party in Canada. I do, however, believe in giving back to Canada. I've been an unpaid advisor to different Canadian governments several times. As I noted to Ogo in 2010, I was among a member of Canadians advising Finance Minister Flaherty. In 2013, I was asked by Prime Minister Harper to serve on the Canadian Advisory Committee on the Public Service. And in 2016, I was asked by Minister Morneau to chair his Advisory Council for Economic Growth with 13 other Canadians. I believe the Growth Council did important work for Canadians. Its recommendations included building more Canadian infrastructure, speeding up approvals for resource projects, cutting red tape, attracting foreign talent and capital, unleashing key sectors such as agriculture, and providing the basis for reskilling Canadians to deal with technological change. I'm very proud of that work, and I'm honored to have served Minister Morneau and the government on that council. As I've stated previously, I had no involvement whatsoever in any awarding of paid work to McKinsey by the federal government, including the CIB, since I relocated to Asia in 1996. In joining the public service as ambassador to China in 2019, I underwent a thorough conflict of interest process with the ethics commissioner to ensure that my prior roles with McKinsey and elsewhere would not conflict with my public service obligations. That included a full proactive recusal that screened me from dealing with McKinsey, and of course, any decisions made by the Federal Public Service relating to McKinsey. I did participate in one meeting relating to the CIB while I was ambassador. This was a meeting on June 23rd, 2020, that I joined as part of the Strategic Refresh Project in 2020. My participation was requested by the chair of the CIB, who was Michael Sabia at that time. That's who requested the meeting. And I gave my perspective and context on the direction of CIB. I was obviously not compensated for this meeting. Finally, as I said to Ogo, I think it's important to separate the work of McKinsey from the times that I, as a private citizen, sat on several advisory councils as a volunteer, and at the request, again, of Prime Minister Harper and Ministers Flaherty and Minister Morneau. Those advisory councils made recommendations to elected officials. Sometimes they accepted the recommendations, and sometimes they did not. In these instances, advice came from a panel of volunteers convened by the government, not from McKinsey. I chaired the Growth Council, and McKinsey supported the Growth Council's work by providing data and information to help the council on a pro bono basis. Again, I appreciate the committee's invitation today, and I hope I can be helpful to your review. I'm happy to answer your questions. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barton. And finally, we have Mr. Guillemette. Mr. Guillemette, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, good morning. I'm pleased to be here today to testify as part of your study on McKinsey & Company's role in the creation of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. My name is Bruno Guillemette, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the BIC. I was appointed to the first board of the BIC in November 2017. My remarks today will focus on my background, on Canada's need for an institution such as the BIC to invest in the next generation of critical infrastructure for Canadians, and the role that I played in the startup activities of the BIC. I'd like to start by talking about my background and experience. I'm a Chartered Professional Accountant, or CPA, and I hold the designation of Chartered Financial Analyst. Over the course of my career, I've held senior positions in financing and asset management of infrastructure projects around the world, including at the Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec and PSP Investments. I'm currently the Chief Financial Officer of a publicly traded company in the renewable energy sector. The demands of this role, as well as the annual reporting requirements over the past few weeks, explain why I have been unable to attend the previously scheduled meetings of the committee. In December 2017, I agreed to step down from the board of directors to serve as interim chief investment officer of the BIC. I took this position in order to contribute to the important startup phase of the bank's development. I had indicated that I was interested in doing this for a short period because of the fact that I lived in Montreal and had family obligations. I had this role for 5 months, from January to May of 2018, and it was a privilege to assume these responsibilities at a unique time in the history of the BIC. In June of 2018, I returned to my position and my duties on the board, including chairing the board's investment committee. I think it's important to highlight some of the context around the need for institutions such as the BIC to finance and attract investments in infrastructure projects. Canada's infrastructure deficit is estimated to be in excess of $100 billion. The last significant period of infrastructure investment in Canada dates back to the mid-1940s, so almost 80 years ago. Much of our public infrastructure is outdated, and this has a significant impact on our quality of life and our economy. The BIC is doing critical work to address this infrastructure deficit. The success of the BIC means that more infrastructure projects will improve our economy and the daily lives of Canadians. And that will be the case for many generations to come. The BIC has made great strides over the past 5 years, notably expanding the rail network in Quebec and Labrador, introducing high-speed internet services, or rather expanding high-speed internet services in Manitoba, expanding electric bus systems in Alberta, and reliable energy storage in Ontario. And there are many other examples. Finally, with respect to the BIC's work with respect to professional service firms, when I joined the BIC, it was in a startup phase. There was literally no staff. The BIC needed a lot of help to get started. We had to develop all of the aspects of its structure and its operations, from the initial governance of the company to strategy to corporate policies for financial management and risk management, and to meet timelines and expectations so that the BIC could begin receiving projects and making investments. I assumed the role of acting Chief Investment Officer to begin developing the BIC's investment policies. My priorities were to establish the foundation for CIB's investment function, including the development of investment criteria and project evaluation criteria. As the sole executive, and in collaboration with the chair of the board, who assumed the responsibilities of the president and CEO during this period, I think it's understandable that we had to rely on consultants to help us carry out some of these initial essential activities. I worked closely with the CIB board chair at the time, Janice Fukakusa, rather. Before hiring consultants, we would consult with various people from various consulting firms, including McKinsey, to understand which options would be available for the CIB's startup assistance. In January of 2018, we retained McKinsey to support the bank by providing investment advisory services as part of its startup activities. In March of 2018, we again engaged the services of McKinsey to support the BIC in developing governance and risk management policies. At the time I was at the BIC, we were also in discussion with other consultants, and we ended up hiring some others of them for other work related to the startup. McKinsey's work involved providing strategic experts who had world-renowned expertise on infrastructure. And I'm convinced that they made a significant contribution to the startup of the BIC. I appreciate the committee's attention and interest in this subject, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Guillemette.
The committee's attention that unfortunately we will be unable to receive testimony from Mr. Morneau. We've received word from translation services that unfortunately Mr. Morneau does not have the appropriate equipment necessary for us to receive testimony from him today in a safe manner. Mr. Morneau, unfortunately, we will not be able to hear from you today. We will, as a committee, have a discussion to determine how members will be able to receive answers to the questions that I'm sure they have prepared for you, and we will get back to you at another date. But for the time being, sir, I welcome you once again. I apologize that we were unable to hear from you today, and I ask that you kindly log off.
Chair, just a brief point of order on that.
Thank you.
Chair, just a brief point of order on that. I know that it's been a long-established expectation that people have the headsets. This isn't new information, and I'm sure a headset was sent. So it is very disappointing that Mr. Morneau isn't prepared with the right equipment, and I think the committee would certainly like to hear from him. So just I think that's important to note, but I know we'll be having further discussion on it later.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Janice. Yes, Ms. O'Connell.
Can I just ask, was Mr. Morneau sent the equipment?
He was, from what I gather from the clerk, he was using a MacBook and did not have the appropriate adapter for the equipment that we sent him.
So the House needed to probably confirm with what, or the clerk's office need to confirm with what proper equipment, because it's my understanding he was confirmed with ample time to provide that equipment. So why could we not have just asked him questions and he could reply to the committee in writing?
Sure, I'll turn it over to Mr. Janice.
Yeah, I think we should sort of proceed with the witnesses we have. I mean, that's obviously not normally how witness questioning works. It's supposed to be a dialogue back and forth where we get feedback from the witnesses and can ask follow-up questions. And so I think maybe we should just leave it there.
Yes.
Well, that might be, sorry, I had the floor. That might be like.
You didn't actually, he had the floor.
No,
So
sorry.
I'm going to go first to Ms. O'Connell, then to you, Dr. Lewis.
Mr. Chair, that is in fact, I've sat on committees where the headset no longer works or something happens and committee proceeds with asking of questions for the witness and they can supply the response in writing. Absolutely, that's not ideal, but this is a hybrid format that is not what we have done in the past and we've made do. So I don't see why we couldn't still have our questions posed to the witness, he's here, and then allow that response to come back to the committee. There's absolutely nothing
Thank you,
wrong
Ms.
with that,
O'Connell.
and we've done that in other committees.
Dr. Lewis?
Chair, the rules clearly show, and the cases in our principal book clearly shows that written interrogatories are clearly different. They produce different responses than oral evidence, and there is a right for citizens, for taxpayers, to be able to question those executives that were in charge of certain functions. And so written interrogatories are very, very different, and we do not prefer that manner, and we will be bringing a motion to have him come back and give evidence in an oral format.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Can I propose to members that we move forward as Mr. Janice had proposed with the witnesses that we do have appearing before us, and perhaps with 10 minutes left I can suspend for us to discuss this further, or we can resume at the next meeting. Does that work for members? Next meeting? Okay. So we'll begin with the line of questioning from Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis, I'll turn the floor over to you for 6 minutes, please.
Mr. Barton, thank you for being here today. In your testimony at OGO Committee on February 1st, you gave the following evidence, and I'm going to quote your testimony. First, I want to be clear that I have had no involvement whatsoever in awarding of paid work to McKinsey by federal government since I relocated to Asia in 1996. In joining the public service as ambassador to China in 2019, I underwent a thorough conflicts of interest process with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that my prior roles with McKinsey and elsewhere would not conflict with my public service obligations. That included a full proactive recusal that screened me from dealing with McKinsey, and of course, any decisions made by the public service related to McKinsey. You went on to say there were extremely strict rules and protocols put in place. Basically, it was excommunicado, speaking about McKinsey. There were very strict processes and protocols followed. If anything ever came in, it went to the deputy head of the mission or the deputy. Now, Mr. Housefather asked you then, I would assume then that anything that came in with respect to McKinsey as ambassador, you were completely excluded from this and had no part in any discussions. You responded exactly right. That's exactly right. Now, we have testimony that you gave at OGO, and that was false indeed, because Mr. Sabia, the former chair of the CIB, testified here at committee Tuesday that you participated in a McKinsey seminar that was led by McKinsey while you were ambassador. and you have now confirmed this information today. So, Mr. Barton, and it is very concerning that you didn't reveal this at your testimony to OGO. Why did you not reveal this meeting, Mr. Barton?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. As I mentioned in my opening statement, that request came from Michael Sabia. And in fact, to be specific about it, I think that there was a desire to have he wanted to hear from Mark Wiseman and myself. And so I responded to be able to help on that. I was actually only able to be there for about half the meeting because I had a dinner that night. And so it was Michael Sabia who was asking me for the meeting. And if Michael Sabia, who was the chair, asked for the meeting in my capacity as a former Growth Council member, I thought that would be good to do.
So my question was why you didn't reveal that at OGO. You said that there was it was actually excluded. It was excommunicado. You did not reveal that meeting until Michael Sabia came to this committee, and it was revealed that you actually participated in this meeting with McKinsey while you were the ambassador of China. And the emails clearly confirm that this took place. So for clarity, you're confirming that as the ambassador of China at the time, you had the time to participate in a McKinsey-led workshop at the height of a diplomatic crisis when the two Michaels were unlawfully detained in China. Is that what you're confirming to me, sir?
No, I'm not confirming that aspect of it. What I'm saying is that Michael Sabia asked if he could get my views as he was taking on the chair role, and that's what I responded to.
That was at the time where we had a diplomatic crisis with the two Michaels, correct? In June 2020.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to talk in more detail about that, or you can talk to the two Michaels about it. But having a conversation with Michael Sabia in my role, I see as no issue whatsoever.
In fact, I believe it was the very same month you participated in that McKinsey workshop in June 2020 when China formally charged the two Michaels. And after more than 18 months after their arrest, why would you think that it was important as the ambassador of China to carve out time from helping the two Michaels come home to participate in a McKinsey workshop with the Canada Infrastructure Bank? This is the very company that you were supposed to have recused yourself from, that you knew that it was a conflict to associate with. Why was this seminar so important?
As I said, it was Michael Sabia who asked for the call, and I did it. I had a dinner that I actually had to do, so I joined it. I think it was with half an hour left. So nothing changed in terms of my appointments or roles as ambassador. I think you're exaggerating things there. And again, to be able to do a half an hour call if Michael Sabia wants some views on things, I'm happy to do that.
To do? Or did you do?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
How many seminars of this nature did you do? Because you said you were happy to do that.
Yeah, that's the one. That is the conversation that I had. There may be other times that Michael Sabia called me. I can't remember. We could look through that. The infrastructure bank was I think a very important initiative. I'd be happy if you could look through that.
I would be happy if you could look through that and if you could report back to the committee on how many times you actually had requests of this nature from Michael Sabia and you communicated with Michael Sabia pertaining to the McKinsey and the Infrastructure Bank while you were ambassador of China.
I just want to clarify, it's not related to McKinsey. Michael Sabia would call me. I've known him for a while. When he was taking on a new role like this, he wanted to get input. He called other people as well. So that was the context.
Did you report this interaction with the ethics commissioner?
I didn't feel the need to because this was a conversation that Michael Sabia had requested.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barton, and thank you, Dr. Lewis. Next, we'll go to Mr. Chahal. Mr. Chahal, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for joining us today and providing testimony. I'm going to start off with Mr. Barton. Through our previous discussion, it was determined that the former Conservative government 3P infrastructure program invested about $1 billion, and we've seen about $27 billion so far invested by the Canada Infrastructure Bank, as identified by Mr. Corey previously, and Mr. Guillemette today talked about the $100 billion deficit in infrastructure across Canada. Mr. Barton, given your extensive work with governments, conservative governments, as you identified in 2010 with Finance Minister Jim Flaherty, once again in 2013 with the former Prime Minister Harper on the Canadian Advisory on the Public Service, you have a lot of experience with federal infrastructure over the years and abroad. Could you please comment on Canada's infrastructure gaps and why attracting private investments and public-private partnerships are essential to address the infrastructure gaps that Canada faces?
Sure. And I, first of all, would echo a lot of what Janice said at the outset and also Bruno in terms of the gap. That gap was estimated anywhere between $100 billion to $1 trillion in the Growth Council. There was quite a wide range of it. And as was mentioned, I think Minister Morneau was able to say a couple of things at the beginning, just that this approach of having infrastructure banks has been done in many different parts of the world. Australia is one example in particular, but there are many others. And interestingly enough, Canadian pension funds participate and actually invest Canadian pension money in these infrastructure projects. So Canada, I think, is world-class in the investment on infrastructure. And I think from the Growth Council work, we saw a very significant gap, and it related to everything from, commuter related services, green energy. It related to resources, the need to be able to build pipelines and so forth that are required to get products to the coast. So there were a whole range of areas that were identified as opportunities. And the view would be we don't have to have the government putting the money into this. We can attract private capital, much like, again, Australia, Chile, Brazil, and other places have attracted. The UK, Canadian pension funds are major investors in UK infrastructure, that we could attract that capital to help us in closing the gap. So it very much was seen as a win-win. And, it would be great if we could spend more on ourselves, if you will, as opposed to it all just going outside and attracting the money. I think that was the basis of it.
Thank you for that. It was previously identified through a number of our witnesses, former mayors, current mayors, Mayor Brown, Mayor Sohi, on the important investments in their regions on the zero emissions buses and the importance of that. And I think with Edmonton, Brampton, and Calgary, if using those three examples, that was about $1 billion. And that equals almost the same amount that the Conservative government previously invested in infrastructure through their 3P program. $27 billion so far is an incredible amount to help fix the gap that you've just identified. What suggestions, Mr. Barton, do you have for the Government of Canada to further address the infrastructure gap that we have?
Well, it may be better to hear from some of the executives who are in the group and where it is, because I'm a little out of date. But I think that there's a significant number of projects. You mentioned the green energy, the wind, solar renewables, which is a very significant opportunity across the country. But there's also basic transport infrastructure to get our agricultural products out. There's some significant investments there. So I think there's quite a long list. I think the thing which, again, the CIB, I believe, does well is to assess those many different projects where to invest. And I think the great thing about having private capital is it ensures that it can stand on its own 2 feet. It ensures that it's not just being subsidized, that it will be able to continue and earn returns. So I think the bank plays a really important role in that, in ensuring high quality projects, and the more that are done, the more cases are laid out. So I think that there's significant opportunity. I'm frankly happy to hear that it's getting close to 30 billion, but I think quite a lot more is needed, and hopefully we'll see more of that over time.
Thank you. I'm surprised that my Conservative colleagues would be against investments in Western Canada in transportation infrastructure and moving more agricultural products to markets. That's shocking and surprising. Monsieur Guillemette, would you like to add to that?
Thank you for your question. I guess I'll just echo what Dominic mentioned. I worked for two large Canadian pension funds, and at the time we had a few discussions with employees of the government, asking why the pension funds were investing money in large projects in
Mr.
foreign
Guillemette,
countries.
unfortunately, we have to cut you off there. We're out of time, unfortunately. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelona.
Next, we have Mr. Barcelona-Duval. You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I want to start by acknowledging all the witnesses and thanking them for being with us today. And like my colleague, I do want to express my disappointment at not having Mr. Marneau with us today. I hope that he will be able to appear later and to have a discussion with the committee. I'm going to start with Mr. Barton. Mr. Barton, you were named the president of the Growth Advisory Council. You did so in a pro bono fashion. I'm wondering if you did that in your capacity as an individual, or in your capacity as the leader of McKinsey.
Thank you for your question. I did that as a private individual, as I mentioned. I think giving back to Canada is good. I've done this in other countries in which I've lived, South Korea, Singapore.
C'est parfait. Vous avez répondu.
Perfect. I think you answered my question, Mr. Barton. So you answered my question, and just as a follow-up question, there are McKinsey employees who essentially acted as a secretariat for the Growth Council that was set up by the Trudeau government. That's something that was revealed to us by Mr. Sabia in a previous meeting. So I'm wondering, if those people also did their work in a pro bono capacity.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it was clear from the outset of my testimony, too, that there was the McKinsey provided pro bono support, providing basic just facts that if there were requests from the group.
So the services were free, but were the employees paid?
Yes, the employees were paid. They were working for McKinsey.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to know. It would have surprised me to have all of that mobilization and then have them do the work completely for free. Now, in the Liberal platform in 2015, the Infrastructure Bank was supposed to ensure that municipalities had lower interest rates to build infrastructure projects like housing, for example. That's directly from the Liberal platform. But the conclusions of the Growth Council actually led to a different vision. In October 2016, in their first report, they described a vision of the BIC, and it said that it would be based on public-private partnerships And at the long-term investment summit a month later, the bank was even being presented as based on private investment. So that's a radical change in its sort of orientation or strategy. So it seems that the government quickly followed the advice of the Advisory Growth Council. Do you think that McKinsey's influence was responsible for that change of direction?
There were 14 members of the Growth Council. I was the chair. Actually, the two key people who were playing the role in it, there are others involved too, were Michael Sabia and Mark Wiseman, who have a lot of experience in the area. We, again, as I said, the Growth Council thought that there was a significant infrastructure gap. We looked for different ways of trying to close it.
Merci.
Thank you. I don't have a lot of time. I'm sorry to cut you off. My question is, was it the influence of McKinsey that led to that change of direction? Because, at the last meeting of the committee, Mr. Sabia confirmed that in addition to acting as a secretariat, McKinsey also contributed quite significantly to reports and deliberations. So McKinsey's pro bono work and the employees of McKinsey who were paid for their work, I mean, isn't that just really a way of getting around having to be registered as a lobbyist?
McKinsey doesn't do policy work. McKinsey wasn't involved in making those recommendations. It was a Growth Council with 14 members that made the recommendation. And as I mentioned, there were other recommendations that we put forward that were not accepted. We believe, for example, in brownfield, that we'd sell existing infrastructure projects to get private capital in. That was not accepted by the government.
Oui, je comprends que c'est le conseil qui fait les recommandations.
So I understand that it was the council that made the recommendations. I think that was clear from what you said. But we also know that it was McKinsey staff that were really sort of at the basis of the council. So even if you were there as a private individual, there was also McKinsey staff there doing pro bono work. So, I mean, I don't know how you managed to distinguish between those two hats. It seems to me that in any company, if the staff is supporting, if the staff there comes from a particular company, they come with a particular point of view, they come with a particular type of influence, particularly if they're coming from McKinsey. Now, if I understood correctly, how much time do I have, Mr. Chair? 20 seconds. All right. Well, last question. At the Davos Economic Forum, there was a meeting between Trudeau and BlackRock investors. That was something you organized, or was that something you organized, or was that McKinsey or the Prime Minister who organized that?
At Davos, I organized a group of about 20 business leaders from around the world to meet the Prime Minister.
Merci beaucoup.
And
Thank you
secondly,
very much,
just,
Mr.
on your
Barton.
first question. Okay.
Sorry, unfortunately, we're out of time, Mr. Barton. Merci, Monsieur Barclay-Duval. Next, we have Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses. Perhaps I'll start by asking Mr. Barton if he'd like to just finish his response to my colleague's last question.
Thank you very much. Yes, just on that, the point that was being made, about where the recommendations came from, just to reinforce again, it was the Growth Council that made the decisions. McKinsey wasn't part of those deliberations. When we made recommendations, it was just the Growth Council that was there. And again, the two drivers of the thinking and the work, the leads on the team, if you will, because we'd broken up into teams on it, were Michael Sabia and Mark Wiseman. And if you know those two individuals, I think they've got strong views of how they feel about it, not necessarily consistent. So the idea that McKinsey was coming up with the recommendations is completely false.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Much of our discussion here at the committee has centered around this perceived conflict of interest because we have a relatively small number of players that are all playing different roles at different times in the same organization. It feels like there are some questions that the Canadian public would want to ask about how that perceived conflict was managed. For instance, McKinsey had yourself as the head of the advisory council, also landed this $1.5 million contract to advise the CIB. And, based on our previous questions, there were McKinsey clients who ended up, coming forward, proposing investments and being involved in the bank on a commercial basis. Now, there was a document that members of the Advisory Council on Growth were asked to sign to guard against perceived and actual or real, apparent, or perceived conflict of interest. And I'm wondering, because there's been a lot of discussion in this meeting and some qualifiers added, I'm wondering if you're acting in a pro bono capacity versus your McKinsey role, whether that is an effective way to manage perceived conflict of interest, in your opinion.
We had a lot of discussions with it, and it's unfortunate again that Minister Morneau is not here, because it'd be good you can hear his view on it, or talk to I think it was Paul Rochon, who was the deputy minister at the time, and there was a clear arrangement that was signed with the McKinsey support team in terms of what they could do and not do. We discussed it as a council. The view was we needed facts and support, and that again, in our decisions that we actually made, our deliberations, those were just done only with the council. There was no one from McKinsey who was in those sessions. So it was very much providing information that we requested, that members of the council requested. It was not to provide any input, ideas.
Correct me if I'm wrong,
so
but
forth.
You were with McKinsey in those sessions, were you not?
With what? No, McKinsey. It was. Yes, I am. I was the chair of the council, moving things forward. I don't think that had any linkage to what the secretariat team was doing. But every single member of the council would have some sort of a, potential conflict, if you will. But I didn't see any issue with that, and nor did the government secretariat that we were working with.
Right. And again, these are many of these questions are questions I'd love to ask to Mr. Morneau. It's unfortunate that he wasn't able to join us. In a 2017 article in the Globe and Mail, the interviewer asked you about conflict of interest, and you agreed that potential conflicts must be avoided in all of these types of discussions. But it says here that you also said that the nature of the work meant that any recommendations were the product of wide-ranging debate rather than the opinion of any single member of the committee. And here it's referring to the advisory council. Does the fact that recommendations are the product of a group discussion versus coming from an individual, does that guard against perceived conflict of interest?
I actually think it does. Again, to just the debate that we had, very serious debates on pretty well every single issue that was there. You had a group of very strong-minded individuals in there, and I cannot underscore the importance of that debate and discussion. There were people who, for example, thought that the infrastructure target should be much, much more significant than it actually was. There were people that felt that, again, the brownfield approach was actually more important than setting up the bank. So we had all different types of views that were being put forward on actually every single recommendation. The only one that probably wasn't as much a debate was on when we talked about some of the key sectors like agriculture that we thought were important to help support.
Because we only have a few more seconds. I'm not an expert in managing conflict of interest or in governance, but I've never heard of ensuring that discussions are in a group context as being an effective way to manage perceived conflicts of interest. So I'm a little bit surprised by that. My last question. The chair's cutting me off.
Yeah,
okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll wait till the next round.
Time for another
thank you,
question.
Mr. Barton.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach, and you do have a round coming up, so you'll hold your questions for then. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Paul Huss.
Next, we have Mr. Paulus. Mr. Paulus, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Barton, I was at the OGO committee last February when you appeared. And you said in your opening remarks then that you underwent a rigorous process when you were appointed ambassador. And you underwent a rigorous conflict of interest process to make sure that your connections with McKinsey didn't constitute a problem. And there was a proactive recusal that prevented you from creating any conflict of interest. But as you know, and you said this in your notes today, that there are emails between McKinsey's staff and their communication with members of the BIC. These emails are clear. There was an attempt to organize meetings, the advisory council meetings. There was an email from Zach Kotler from June 2020 addressed to the BIC that said, by organizing a meeting, it says you would be available on June 23rd, and we'd like to limit the participation of this meeting to a few meetings. It's a little bit sensitive, and I don't want to offend anyone, but I want to make sure that Dominic is able to speak freely. So you said earlier that this meeting took place, but if we go back to February 1st, when you said that as ambassador you followed all of the rules, there was no link with McKinsey, well, now we have these emails between McKinsey and the Infrastructure Bank that say, oh, Dom's going to be here, but we have to be careful, it's a delicate situation. So can you confirm that you actually lied on February 1st?
I totally disagree with you. Again, that was a request from Michael Sabia. It was not I did not see that at all as a McKinsey thing. I recall that as a request from Michael Sabia. I didn't see any of those emails, so I don't know what they said or where they were, but I didn't receive those emails you're talking about. What I received is a request from Michael Sabia to speak with him. I think the sensitivity is relating to the fact that there was a reset going on, and that Michael wanted to have an open and candid discussion about where things were going.
Mr. Barton, sorry to interrupt. You mentioned Michael Sabia. And, we have correspondence here with Zach Kotler talking about Dom, and let's look at the agenda, and he's available June 23rd between 8 and 9. And you say that you're not aware of this, that you just got a request from Michael Sabia. But the people at McKinsey know your agenda. They know when you're available. So, let's be realistic here. Now, on February 1st, there were a series of questions asked, clearly from the PMO. One of the questions was, I presume that anything that could be received about McKinsey was made available to you and that you didn't participate in any discussion. And you said that's correct. But today you're saying, no, Michael Sabia invited me, but the people from McKinsey were, managing your agenda, managing your meetings. So are you continuing to say that you haven't been in contact with McKinsey and that McKinsey had no link with the Government of Canada when it comes to your involvement?
What I'm saying is that McKinsey was not managing my agenda whatsoever. The request I received was from Michael Sabia to speak with him. And I will respond to him when he asks if it's on the Growth Council. I have no issue with that. I don't know what they found out.
Mr. Barton, I want to know, you were ambassador. You had the obligation to respect very clear ethical rules, and now you're saying that you had no correspondence with people from McKinsey. How could the people at McKinsey know that you were available from 8 to 9 and 9:15 on June 23rd? How could they know that? Because this is people working at the embassy, and they're giving information about your agenda.
I think that what I would ask is Michael Sabia in terms of how that was set up. I have no idea how that what they were doing or where it was. The request I received was from Michael Sabia, so I'm not on any of those emails. I don't understand where that was.
Connaissez-vous Antonino Piazza?
Do you know Antonino Piazza?
Est-ce que vous connaissez Antonino?
Do you know him?
No, I don't.
Okay, travaille pour McKinsey.
He works for McKinsey in Montreal.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Paul Huss. Next, we have Ms. O'Connell. Ms. O'Connell, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Mr. Barton, let's follow up on that line of questioning because Mr. Sabia was a witness the other day here and was asked a similar line of questioning about that email chain and the sensitivities. And he said, I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have the exact blues in front of me, but he said any normal person reading that exchange, the sensitivity was around not having too many people invited to a meeting so that you could have a candid conversation. And the sensitivity was around not offending anybody that they be asked not to attend a meeting. Does that seem like a fair reading of that situation? Because that's what Mr. Sabia testified.
It does.
Questioning around this particular meeting was described as a McKinsey seminar. But just to be clear, this was a request to have as Mr. Sabia testified, it was a request to get your input on, or your thoughts and ideas around the infrastructure bank. As you've talked about, there was a period of regrowth or restructuring or relooking at how best to move forward. And he said he was seeking opinions and advice. Was McKinsey involved at all in that meeting?
I have no idea. What I remember was talking to. I remember hearing Mark Wiseman. He spoke quite a lot in that, and then it was just a conversation with Michael Sabia. That's all I recall. I don't actually recall the detail, except that it was, I think, at most half an hour because I was coming from a dinner which I wanted to finish before joining, and I certainly didn't see it as a McKinsey seminar. It was a conversation with Michael Sabia and Mark Wiseman about him taking on the new role as chair.
Thank you. That was exactly how Mr. Sabia described it as well, as just simply asking for input. Now, you mentioned at the onset, Mr. Barton, that you also provided advice and to then Minister Flaherty, previous Prime Minister Harper. Minister Flaherty was the finance minister between 2006 2014, and I note that McKinsey actually was awarded contracts during that time. Were you ever questioned by Minister Flaherty, his staff, about conflicts before McKinsey ever being awarded contracts while you were also advising Minister Flaherty and Prime Minister Harper?
No, I wasn't actually even aware that McKinsey did do work at that time with him. Again, what he was asking for was advice on how to improve the productivity of the Canadian economy, how to expand our trade relationships.
Actually, that sounds very similar to then Minister Morneau's request for economic growth. And that advice as well. So it seems that governments of both political stripes have asked you your opinion on that. And at the same time, government, I think between 2011 and I think 18, there was something like 24 McKinsey contracts. So that would go across political governments where you were actually asked by both your thoughts on how to grow economic prosperity in this country. But it's interesting that you're only being questioned as if you had some conflict during the time that it was a Liberal government, and not the exact same advice and requests that you provided to Minister Flaherty, then Prime Minister Harper, and McKinsey also did work with the federal government. But you're not being accused of some sort of conflict of interest during that time. I find that quite interesting. Did anybody ask you from the PMO in Prime Minister Harper's days about your work with McKinsey and if other government departments should perhaps not engage with them, given the fact that you were advising the Prime Minister and Minister Flaherty at the time?
No, nothing at all like that. It was just Minister Flaherty was wonderful to work with. God rest his soul. He always wanted to hear ideas. He would, if he traveled and I happened to be in that city, we would meet, but we never had that. Never had any questions.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Barton, and thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Next, et prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelona.
Next, we have Mr. Barcelona-Duval. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If I've understood correctly, the McKinsey method is essentially to provide free counsel, and then once they sort of have the foot in the door, they create this relationship of dependency so that they can profit from it. It's a bit like a drug dealer who gives the first dose for free. Now, going back in time, if I look at McKinsey, in March 2018, after the bank was set up, McKinsey made a work proposal to be a contractor or a consultant for the bank. And in that offer, it says, we have an in-depth understanding of the Infrastructure Bank of Canada and the context around it. We clearly understand the bank's objectives thanks to our work. So the Secretariat's work and your work actually helped reinforce McKinsey's case for working for the Bank of Canada, Infrastructure Bank of Canada. Now, the last time we had Mr. Sabia before the committee, he said that when the BIC was in a difficult time and needed to be sort of kickstarted, he gave a $1.4 million contract, sole source contract, to McKinsey, and he justified it in the following way. He said the decision at the time, or the justification at the time, was to use people from McKinsey who had participated in the startup of McKinsey to be able to use their expertise. Now, Mr. Barton, I find that interesting because you did this pro bono work, and that allowed you to sort of change the direction of the BIC's initial objective. Initially, in the Liberal platform, the vision was that it sort of shifted it towards the private market, and it also allowed McKinsey to get more contracts. What would you say about that?
First of all, I'd say, again, McKinsey didn't change the approach of what the BIC would be. That was done in the Growth Council, as mentioned. Second, there was a very clear procurement process that was followed and has been. You heard it from Janice at the outset and Bruno. There was a process. Other consultants were considered. And third, it's an area of expertise for McKinsey is actually doing infrastructure and pension fund work. So I'm not surprised.
Merci. Donc, je comprends que vous avez aucune.
Thanks. So I understand that you didn't get any benefit from your pro bono work.
Mr. Barcelona-Duval. Next, we have Mr. Backrack. Mr. Backrack, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Barton, from what I've taken from the conversation, one of the main goals of the bank was to crowd in private investment to meet the needs of public infrastructure. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, it was above all, to increase the amount of infrastructure spending that we'd be able to do in Canada and to draw on the private sector to be able to add more capital, but also ensure that it was, it was standing on its own 2 feet.
Is because the bank announced it was going to invest in a $655 million transmission line to the United States. And this was being proposed by a giant company with $58 billion in assets that was, very financially successful and able to undertake an investment of that size. And they were able to secure public investment from the CIB. They weren't able to secure it, but they were certainly heading down that path. Was this, how should we understand this in light of the goals of the bank? Because it feels like crowding public investment into private projects that can stand on their own 2 feet.
Chair, I'm not familiar with that, with the details of that. It may be worth asking someone who's actually at the bank who's doing it. I'm not aware of all the different projects that were
Sorry,
being
Mr.
done.
Barton. Maybe it's a question better directed to Mr. Guillemette.
Bonjour, pouvez-vous répéter votre question?
Yes, I'm sorry. Could you repeat your question, please?
L'adressez pas à moi.
I didn't know that it was going to be addressed to me.
Yeah, the question was around, the contrast between the idea of crowding private investment into the needs of public infrastructure versus crowding public investment into private infrastructure. And the Lake Erie Connector was an example of a huge project being proposed by a private company that had the means to build it and stand on its own 2 feet. And the bank seemed to have come along and convinced ITC to take public investment. How is the public to understand the CIB going after private projects and with public money?
Le rôle de la
The role of the BIC is to bring together public infrastructure projects and to sort of scale them up thanks to money from other investors, often private investors, so that we can build more infrastructure in Canada. Thank you very much, Mr. Guillemette.
Much, Mr. Backrack. Next, we have Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Mr. Barton, you seem to have misled OGO committee in not disclosing the meeting of June 23rd, 2020. In fact, your evidence that you gave was that there was no contact between you and McKinsey and the Infrastructure Bank. Now today, you're stating that you had extensive contact with Mr. Sabia. Can you undertake to provide the committee with a list of communications between you and Mr. Sabia, the Infrastructure Bank, and McKinsey while you were ambassador of China?
I'd be very happy to do that. And I would also say that on Michael Sabia, sometimes he would just call. So I don't know if I'm going to remember those, but it's that's someone who there were a number of conversations. I can't remember how many. I'll try my best to look at it, but I'm happy to do that.
Efforts undertaking. Now, my next question is for Ms. Fukakusa. Ms. Fukakusa, thank you so much for coming today. When you were chair of the bank, you approved 2 contracts with McKinsey that was actually contrary to the bank's interim procurement policy requirements, correct?
Just for some context, we had a procurement policy that was being developed, and I developed it in conjunction with the infrastructure department and the CIB transition office. The work called for having the way the rules worked was that you should have up to 2 to 3 bidders, but if there was a case in point that the work needed to be done more quickly, and you had experience with the contractor, then it could be done for the 2 cases.
In fact,
Yes?
It does not say 2 to 3 bidders. It says 3 bidders. That is your policy.
Right.
I can take
Right.
you just gave evidence 2 to 3 bidders. That's not true. That's correct?
So it says up to 3 bidders. So
no, it says
as I was
at
saying,
least 3 bidders, and I will take you to the policy, and it's actually point B in the policy. It says before any procurement contract where the estimate expenditure exceeds $100,000 is entered into by the bank will solicit bids, and then Section B says inviting bids on a proposed procurement from potential suppliers identified by the bank as potentially suitable where possible. Bids should be invited from at least 3 potential bidders. It does not say up to 3, Ms. Fukakusa. Where are you getting that information from?
So I think it's from a further down clause that basically says that if there's a urgent necessity, it can be fewer bidders and can be appointed directly with the sign off from the transition office. So with respect though to the studies that happened when we engaged McKinsey for the risk management work and for setting up the investment parameters, we had bids from McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. And it was McKinsey was chosen because of their strength of their infrastructure and advisory practice.
So, Ms. Fukakusa, you're stating that you had 3 bidders, but in fact, in an email from Anne Roper to Frederick Duguay, Anne confirmed, she says, Janice confirmed, which is you, that they had 2 bidders for both the investment strategy work, the first engagement, as well as the risk. So why did you tell Anne that you only had 2 bidders when you're telling us today that you actually had 3 bidders?
Well, we had McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group and PwC for the risk segment. And what happened is with respect to PwC, they didn't have the scope or the capacity. So in fact, what I was referring to were the 2 that had also participated on the investment management side.
Okay. So can you... I'm sorry, did you want to add something?
Yeah. So what I wanted to add is to remember that the whole activity that was happening at the time of this, and this was right after we got established, got the board together, was about creating very good governance and infrastructure to facilitate the actual investing of the government and our taxpayers' dollars into infrastructure. So the urgency was to get all of these processes in place.
Thank you.
And so that's...
I'll let you finish, Ms. Fukakusa.
Okay, the urgency was to get all of these processes in place because there was a lot of funding available, but without having proper governance around how the money is being decisioned and spent, we couldn't be positive, given the independent board that we had at the time, that we were making the right decisions on behalf of Canada.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fukakusa, and thank you, Dr. Lewis. Prochainement, nous avons...
Next, we have Mr. Yakino. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here this morning. I'm going to start with Mr. Barton. Why did you not suggest to the Government of Canada to follow the P3 model, the P3 Canada model?
That's a good question. I can't remember what the basis for what the background was for it. I think that the focus we thought was trying to encourage more private capital to come in to ensure that the projects that were being done would be sustainable, would be profitable, and we were concerned about subsidies, and we thought that was the best approach. I think PPPs are good, but that was the priority. The other comment, as I mentioned, we also believed that brownfield sales would be good. So, whether it's actually a utility or an operation that's already moving, do you sell part of that off to the private sector to be able to get capital and then use the proceeds of that to be able to invest in other infrastructure? That was kind of the lines, but I think again, Michael Sabia and Mark Wiseman would be better positioned to answer that than me.
Parfait. Avant de faire...
Perfect. Now, before you decided what you're going to suggest to the government, did you sort of look to other countries in the world, other infrastructure banks around the world for inspiration? Like, were you looking at other models? Could you tell us a little bit about your thinking, your thought process there?
Yeah, we did. We looked. I believe it was again Michael Sabia spoke with and Mark Wiseman. I can't remember now which with Infrastructure Australia. They have a number of players that have done very well, both at the state level and the national level. We looked at the UK. We looked at also what was happening in Europe with various similar initiatives with infrastructure banks or development banks that were focused on infrastructure. So that was part of the process to try and learn from that.
Merci. Est-ce que vous
Thank you. Do you think that the BIC has been properly carrying out its mandate so far? And what would you say about the progress that's been made over the last 2 years specifically?
Yeah, I feel very good. I mean, hearing the numbers of close to $30 billion is a real movement. And just before this call, I was looking at the website at the number of projects that are being done and the kind of range of the projects, the scale. There's large and small across the country. I think is really encouraging. I hope there'll be more that we can get more private capital through there. But that's a substantive difference. $27 billion, and those, to me, I don't know the details of them, but just reading them look very exciting.
Merci.
Thank you. Ms. Fukakusa, did you interview or hire anyone from McKinsey to work at the BIC?
When I was chair of the board, no, I didn't interview anyone or hire anyone.
Merci.
Thank you. And I have another question for you. Do you feel that the Infrastructure Bank has been carrying out its mandate properly so far? And what would you say about its progress over the last 2 years?
I can't really comment on that because I haven't been close to it since I've left. All I can comment on is the fact that when I did leave the bank, there was a significant pipeline of projects in place and of different projects, not just in the pipeline, but being examined. So I thought that they were off to a good start.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Iacono. Next, we have Mr. Jenis. Mr. Jenis, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Barton, with all due respect, you're really expecting this committee to swallow quite a fudge. You're telling us you just spoke all the time with Michael Sabia, no big deal, one public servant to another. He would call you, you would chat. But the issue, the core issue here is McKinsey's presence and involvement in these discussions. That's what we're asking for. That's what we need to know about. Is when you were talking to, giving advice to, exchanging opinions with Michael Sabia at the time you were both public servants, what was the role of McKinsey in the context of those discussions? Should the public find it odd or even suspicious that the conversations between you and another public servant were actually being facilitated and convened by McKinsey?
Michael Sabia is the one that asked for the call. You've got how many thousands of emails to look at to see if there were any other conversations. I don't have access to that. I had conversations with Michael Sabia when he asked. He wasn't a public servant during this time. I think he was at the Monk School, I believe. I can't recall correctly. So, he would call to ask for views on things, and that's exactly how I took it. I didn't see that at all with anything to do with McKinsey. It was Michael Sabia asking for.
Okay, sir. This is what you said before, but if I can drill down here, was McKinsey present for or involved in any of those discussions, formal or informal, that happened between you and Michael Sabia during the time when you were Canada's ambassador to China?
I had many conversations with Michael, and they were not related to anything to do with, Bob. It wasn't just on the infrastructure bank. The one conversation here, all I recall is speaking with Michael Sabia and Mark Wiseman being on there. It was a phone line. I didn't see who was in the room. As far as I was concerned, it was a request from Michael Sabia to get input. And that's how I saw it.
Thank you, sir. You've said this before. Was McKinsey on the line or participating in any of these conversations?
There's this one conversation, which apparently there's an email on. I was not aware that the McKinsey was at that. What I was aware of is that Michael Sabia had asked for a meeting, a call, and I took it. Again, I couldn't be there the whole time, so I wasn't there at the beginning. I joined in the last 30 minutes.
This is the June 23rd one.
This is the June 23rd.
Okay, because in particular, we have an email from Zach Cutler, who is a partner at McKinsey, who, in reference to the meeting, says, notes that you're going to be there, says Dom's calendar has been pretty tight, so looks like this is the only time we could get him. Now, if Zach Cutler, who's a partner at McKinsey, has intimate awareness of your schedule, if he's not talking to you directly, then presumably someone at McKinsey is talking to your executive assistant or the person responsible for your schedule. Is that a reasonable conclusion to draw?
No, it's not a reasonable conclusion to draw, because I had a request from Michael Sabia. Maybe they talked to Michael Sabia. His assistant had called. I have no idea what the background. I haven't
Okay,
seen any
so
emails.
the way this could have happened on your account is that Michael Sabia is talking to you about your schedule and then relaying the information back to McKinsey and then inviting McKinsey to join a call with you. And throughout this whole time, you have just no idea that McKinsey is present in the meeting while Michael Sabia is relaying information between you and McKinsey about specific details of your availability and schedule. And you want us to believe that at no point someone from McKinsey was talking directly to you or your executive assistant. And it was just a complete surprise to you that McKinsey was on the call.
I wasn't aware of that. And again, what I would say differently is that maybe it was Michael Sabia's secretary that was trying to set up the call and told the McKinsey people. I don't know. That's a very valid outcome.
Yeah,
it's
just that that's just not plausible, sir, because Annie Roper from the Infrastructure Bank is communicating with Zach Cutler at McKinsey and Antonio Piazza at McKinsey, and they're discussing your schedule. They're discussing events that they're going to put together at which you're going to participate, along with McKinsey, along with various others. I guess either you're not telling the committee the truth, or you routinely take meetings where you have no idea who's going to be there, either before or after. Even if we believe your account that you're just totally ignorant of these things, that doesn't sound like a very effective ethical screen. If you say there's an ethical screen that's supposed to keep you from interacting with McKinsey, but McKinsey can show up at meetings and you're just not aware they're there, but you're fine to share your advice, not knowing who's on the call. I mean, at best. Isn't that highly negligent?
Neither of those are correct.
Thank you, Mr. Barton.
Look forward to following
Mr.
up.
Jennis. Next, we have Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome to our witnesses today. It's unfortunate we lost Mr. Morneau because of technology problems, but so I'll skip the questions for him and go directly to Mr. Barton. Mr. Barton, as you've alluded to today, with $27 billion available for investment through the CIB Bank, of course, is great for the infrastructure programs across this country. A lot of work is being done in many areas that desperately need that funding, like the broadband, for instance, programs that are being developed in rural Canada, and wouldn't happen without the support of the bank. I want to ask you, for the benefit of the committee, if you can please tell us about your role on the advisory committee, Council of Growth, and what your contributions were to the conversations surrounding the creation of the Canada Infrastructure Bank.
Thank you for your question. As I mentioned in the opening statement, there was a range of different areas that we were looking at to try and, get more growth in the Canadian economy and improve median incomes. That was sort of the target that we were aiming for 2030. And infrastructure was a core element of it. We found from other country work that can be a sort of a multiplier in terms of productivity improvement and growth. So we knew that would be a core piece. As I mentioned, there was, reskilling. There was unleashing some sectors that we thought were important, like agriculture, healthcare, and so forth. So there were 13 recommendations in total. And on the infrastructure side, again, the way I tried to do it on the Growth Council, because we had 14 people with these different sort of initiatives, if you will. We sort of divided the group up to kind of look in more detail for then the discussion with the broader group. So on the infrastructure piece, the key drivers were Mark Wiseman and Michael Sabia. Ken Curtis also played an important role in that. And so they were the ones that were kind of driving the sort of thinking, looking at what's happening in other countries to come up with recommendations that we would debate. And what I was trying to do, because there were pretty strong-minded individuals in the group, is that we could actually get to a conclusion because there were very robust views in that group. There were no wilting lilies in there, and so my job was to make sure that we were covering the right areas, that we were able to get specific and actionable programs that then the government could review, and as I said again, decide to take or reject. And they didn't accept everything that we'd recommended, because it was up to them to decide what they wanted to do. So that really was the approach. I don't know if there's any more information I can provide.
Given that you have a history of involvement with the former Conservative government, of course, and with the current Liberal government, can you please tell the committee why you feel it's important for all political parties and at all levels of government to support getting infrastructure projects built for Canadians?
I believe that having infrastructure, whether again it relates to commuters, transportation between key cities or within cities, being able to get our products to market. Again, as I mentioned, on the agricultural side, the entire renewables energy side, which is going to be one of the largest capital reallocations in human history. We've got a ton of opportunity in Canada to do that, and so this will have long-term benefit for Canadians, and while it's benefiting Canadians through all of the benefits of what the infrastructure provides as projects themselves, they also contribute a lot. So it's a very important part, I think, of Canada achieving prosperity.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Fukakusa, can you please tell us about your career in finance and how that helped prepare you for your role of inaugural chairperson of the CIB Board of Directors?
20 seconds, if possible, Ms. Fukakusa. Oh, unfortunately, you're on mute, Ms. Fukakusa.
Apologies. My career in finance was extensive. I worked for RBC for 31 years in various divisions, including financing of infrastructure, everything from that to setting up governance and risk management and work around investment approvals, that sort of thing. So I think that given where I sat and given my familiarity with financial institutions, I had a good background to take on the role of chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fukakusa.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur.
Next, we have Mr. Barcelot Duval. You have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I just want to remind everyone that the work of the committee that we're doing today is really to try to understand the role that McKinsey and Company played in the creation of the bank, the Infrastructure Bank of Canada. That's the title of our study. Now, Mr. Barton, from the beginning of your testimony, you've seemed to claim that McKinsey has nothing to do with anything and had no influence whatsoever. And yet, who recommended that the Infrastructure Bank of Canada be created? Well, the Growth Council that was presided by you. The Secretariat of the Growth Council, which recommended the creation of the Infrastructure Bank, was made up of a lot of employees of McKinsey. And when the Infrastructure Bank was subsequently set up, what happened? Well, they awarded consulting contracts to who? McKinsey. So a number of people on the board were chosen from McKinsey. And some of McKinsey's clients also got millions of dollars worth of contracts from the Bank of Infrastructure. In fact, the Infrastructure Bank is so closely tied with McKinsey. But Mr. Barton, you're claiming that all of this is just chance. It's all just a coincidence.
Mr. Chair, you made a number of points on this. Number one, the Infrastructure Bank was part of Liberal Party policy in 2015 to suggest that McKinsey's come up with that is false. Number two, it was the Growth Council that was actually coming up with recommendations, not McKinsey. I mentioned again the lead people on that were Michael Sabia, Mark Wiseman.
Monsieur Barton, je comprends ce que vous me dites.
Mr. Barton, I understand what you're saying, but I understand, but you're saying that the
Un à la fois, s'il vous plaît, just
one at a time, please, just so that our interpreters can work and not have people talking at the same time.
point d'ordre, Ms. O'Connell.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Yes, we can't speak over witnesses because translators need the opportunity to hear, but it is customary in committee that if you ask a question, you give reasonably the same amount of time for the witness to answer. I'd like to hear the answer of Mr. Barton.
Thank you very much, Ms. O'Connell. Mr. Basso-Duval,
Mr. Basso-Duval, you still have 30 seconds left. I did stop the clock there, so you can continue asking your question to Mr. Barton, and then we'll give him a chance to respond. Thank you. So what I was saying, Mr. Barton, is that you're saying that the Infrastructure Bank is not an idea of McKinsey or your colleagues, but what we've heard from Mr. Sabia and even from the contracts is that you were very deeply involved in the setup and creation of the Infrastructure Bank. And, you're saying it was in the Liberal platform, but we've already shown that in the Liberal platform, the Infrastructure Bank didn't have the same form as what it actually became later under McKinsey's influence. It really does seem that McKinsey had some influence there.
Thank you for your question. Number one, what I'm saying is the idea of an infrastructure type bank was already a part of the Liberal Party policy. Number two, the Growth Council, in looking at many other different infrastructure banks and approaches around the world, is the one that came up with the recommendations, again, led by a sub-team, which was Michael Sabia, Mark Wiseman, and Ken Curtis. Those were the key drivers of it. All the McKinsey work you've heard from Janice and the conversation was done through official procurement process, and other people were looked at for it. So
thank you.
And as it relates to the
Thank you very much, Mr. Barton. Merci, Mr. Basso-Duval. Next, we have Mr. Backrack. Mr. Backrack, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, my question is for Mr. Guillemette. And Mr. Guillemette, early on in the bank's evolution, it pursued a pilot project in Mapleton, Ontario, that sought to privatize the community's drinking water and wastewater. And, I can assume, since it was characterized as a pilot project, that the bank wanted to learn something that could inform future such projects. Obviously, this is a controversial proposal to privatize what traditionally is public infrastructure. That project didn't go ahead. In the end, the community assessed the risk and the value to residents and decided against it and was stuck with a $300,000 legal bill as a result. What did the bank learn from that pilot project?
Merci pour votre question.
Thank you for your question. Firstly, the bank does not seek to privatize infrastructure. The bank tries to get private capital involved with the support of public authorities, whether it be municipalities, whether it be provinces, whether it be the federal government. So we're talking about a partnership with government authorities and the private sector, whether it's operators or investors. So we're looking to use the lever effect of this capital investment, getting more capital investment in order to help with the public investments, so to help in growth in infrastructure. And as you said, I don't have specific recall of the example you just gave us, but as you said, that project did not move forward. And so I think that it was probably in collaboration and discussion between staff at the bank and public decision makers if they decided not to go forward with this project. That is the entire philosophy of the bank, is to have the support, public support, for these types of investments.
Pursue privatization, but it's certainly involved in projects whereby private investors come in, invest in building infrastructure, and then are responsible for operating that infrastructure and charging users of the infrastructure fees. And that sounds to a lot of people like privatization. Isn't that a fair characterization?
No.
No, it's not privatization. What it is, and I insist on the fact that this is a partnership between the public and private. There is private investment and public investment involved, whether it's at the various government levels. And this is not privatization. It is a collaboration, a partnership. And you also referred to P3 Canada, and those are also partnerships with. Thank you, Mr. Guillemette.
Mr. Janis, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Mr. Barton, I'm going to give you one more chance to shed some light in respect to my previous questions about your engagement with McKinsey while you were ambassador to China. You told the Operations Committee regarding that engagement that it was excommunicado. But Zach Cutler at McKinsey knew details of your schedule and was discussing them with Annie Roper at the Infrastructure Bank and was convening a meeting involving you, McKinsey, and the Infrastructure Bank. The emails prove that McKinsey was intimately involved, which clearly contradicts your earlier testimony. This is important because McKinsey's special access to government allowed it to massively increase its take of taxpayers' money, and your presence helped make that happen. You may not have been selling directly, but your presence helped McKinsey facilitate these sales before and after you were ambassador, and you were, by all indication, fine with that. Given that McKinsey was convening meetings with you, are you prepared to acknowledge that your relationship with McKinsey after you received the appointment as ambassador was not, as you had previously described, excommunicado?
As I said before, to your question, I have no idea how McKinsey was involved or not in that. I received a request from Michael Sabia in his office to speak to him, and that's what I did. I only had 30 minutes because I had a dinner that I had to finish, so I joined it late. I don't know how long it had been going on for. I know that Mark Wiseman was on there. As far as I was concerned, that was a request from Michael Sabia. It's nothing to do with McKinsey.
Yeah, Mr. Barton, I've questioned you before, and your routine willingness to say you didn't know things that you should have known has always struck me as profoundly odd. We have the emails in front of us that show this McKinsey partner knowing your schedule, convening the meeting. And if you, as ambassador to China, had people walking into meetings or facilitating meetings and you didn't know who they were or who was organizing the meeting, that is also very strange. And again, the importance of this here is the advantage that was provided to McKinsey. I think we've heard your thoughts on this, but I don't think it's going to be convincing to anyone. I want to follow up on another point. During your last committee appearance, you defended McKinsey's track record overall, and you called criticism of McKinsey anti-capitalist. And it seemed to me at the time and now that you have missed the critical point that free market capitalism only works when everybody is expected to play by the same rules. And McKinsey was not required to play by the same rules. You were able to facilitate what constituted practically special access, and then McKinsey made over $100 million selling to this government. The government has admitted, the Treasury Board released a press release saying that not all rules were followed in the awarding of contracts to McKinsey. And your colleague, Andrew Pickersgill, was serving the Growth Council that you led while also facilitating informational meetings with McKinsey so-called experts that in fact also led to sales. I would put to you that this is not capitalism as it should be practiced, but this is cronyism, and it may be how things work in the PRC, but it's not how things work or are supposed to work in Canada. Do you think that these kinds of arrangements were acceptable and ethical?
As I said before, I'm very proud of the work McKinsey did. I think you heard from Janice about the impact, or you should ask them about whether there was impact or not in terms of the work. I think McKinsey followed very ethical processes. I think that, as I said, I'm proud to have done the work with the Growth Council. It was giving back. It was a wide range of things that we were focused on, and I think that McKinsey had to follow the procurement rules. I mentioned in that my earlier statement, just in terms of the scale of what was going on, and I'm not saying that $100 million isn't a lot, but in that last fiscal year of 2022, there were $22.2 billion given to different consulting firms. So, yes, McKinsey was doing work. They had to follow the procurement processes and where it was. They didn't get.
Mr. Barton, if I can just jump in to point out again that the Treasury Board has already said publicly, they put out a press release to this effect, that procurement rules were not fully or consistently followed in the awarding of contracts to McKinsey. In terms of your pride in McKinsey's track record, I wanted to ask you another question. This federal government has now joined BC's class action lawsuit against McKinsey over their role in fueling the opioid crisis. You no longer work for McKinsey, so you have nothing to lose by telling us the truth on this point. So when it comes to its work on opioid sales, do you think McKinsey engaged in wrongdoing?
I'll say a couple of things about that. First of all, I've sort of listened to what Mr. Palter had said, who I think was before the committee, and he said McKinsey did no opioid sales or marketing work in Canada. And I think it's important to reflect that.
My question was just a general one. Do you think they engaged in wrongdoing?
No time for an additional question. I was just letting Mr. Barton respond, but you do have another round coming up, Mr. Jennis. Next, we have Ms. Thompson. Ms. Thompson, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Chair, and certainly thank you to the witnesses for coming here, and I'm really delighted to join this committee today. If I could start with you, Mr. Barton, I want to say, first of all, thank you for making yourself available to this committee. I was present for the OGO committee, and I certainly appreciate how you answered the questions. And I, in much the same vein, I do want to say today that at a very personal level, I am offended when within committees we question the character of any witness. So I'm going to ask you, Mr. Barton, what I believe I asked in the last OGO committee. Is there anything that you would like to say to this committee in light of the rapid fire questions and the very brief period of time that you've been given to answer questions?
You're very kind. Thank you. I mean, I'd just say, number one, I think that I'm very proud of that an infrastructure bank was created and moved forward. I think it's going to help Canadians move things forward. I think that the second point is that I believe I was very much operating in the spirit of trying to give something back for the country. This is voluntary work. I think we were given one loonie for each year that we did it, but it was an honor to do it, to be able to serve the country. There was zero aspect of that this be an opportunity for McKinsey. McKinsey is a very large firm that is very busy and has lots of things to do. This is the last thing it needs to be able to generate work. That's not how it's seen. So I don't want to lose the forest for the trees in it, and that this was I think it was important work for the country. I'm excited that a lot of the recommendations actually did go through. Not all of them did, and excited about the progress. And just to reiterate that, I think McKinsey has followed all of the processes in the procurement approach, and I hope we'll really be able to look at the facts clearly like that. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could switch to you, Mrs. Fukakusa, and thank you for coming to committee today. And I also want to acknowledge the work that you do in the not-for-profit sector. And I think giving your time and expertise to the community is commendable. In your opening comments, you referenced similar models in terms of the infrastructure bank in UK and Australia. Could you speak to that and what you learned by looking at other infrastructure banks around the world?
Thank you for your question. They are successful in those two jurisdictions because they're able to use the public funding, and Bruno talked about this a bit, and leverage that for private funding, and in other words, multiply the good of the government funding by engaging private sector to build the infrastructure, to fund it and get it done faster. So basically, that's in essence what it is. It's a very complicated process. So you can understand that when we were standing up the infrastructure bank in Canada, we had to make sure that governance was first and foremost in all the building activity we did, to make sure that we had the right constructs and filters so that when the independent board was faced with a recommendation from the investment group, they were comfortable that all the diligence had been done around it. And I think that is something in the other jurisdictions that you see to this day. And it also shows you the excellent cooperation between public sector and private sector working on the same mandates and the same objectives.
Thank you. Mr. Barton, if I could just go back to you for a moment. We've heard public-private partnerships spoken about today, and if you could speak to the times when that model is appropriate versus when private investment is much more timely or appropriate for understanding with many of the investments that need to happen in very short order to meet the reality of where we are in this 21st century, and also the impact on our infrastructure through climate crisis.
Yeah, I think that public money is actually very important to help provide the, if you will, the security or the baseline that it's going to be long term and it's going to be able to work. Bruno and Janice may correct me, by the way, but it's to provide the base load to incentivize then the private sector to come in and say, okay, this is going to actually have the time frame we're looking at, and we can actually see returns from this. And so it helps encourage it. It's much easier to invest in brownfield than greenfield, and that's why I think, again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barton. We have 12 minutes left, so we'll do what we like to call a rapid fire round. We'll do 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 2 minutes, and 2 minutes, and we will begin the 4-minute round with Dr. Lewis.
My question is for Ms. Fukakusa. In 2018, you asked McKinsey for suggestions on hiring at the bank. On February 28, 2018, Andrew Pickersgill of McKinsey wrote to you in an email with a list of their own McKinsey contractors to hire. Did you expect McKinsey to give you names of outside contractors?
No, when we were starting the bank itself, we need to cast a very wide net on relevant, very capable people in the infrastructure field. So that request was made to McKinsey and was like several requests I made across the network to get at a candidate pool. Just to emphasize that, we hired no one on the McKinsey list. And in fact, when we did the actual search for our senior positions, we used a search firm. So it was just to get a feel for what was there in a potential employment base.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Thomas said in her last round that she's offended when people question the character of witnesses. This might be uncomfortable for some members, but the reality is Mr. Barton is clearly lying to this committee. We have the emails in black and white. And
point of order.
Yes, Ms. Thompson.
I am offended when we say to a witness that they are lying. I'd like you to actually use other language, please.
Yeah. I'll just say on that point of order, Mr. Chair, a person being offended is not a matter of order.
I would like to advise all members and invite all members not to accuse any of our witnesses of lying. I think that's unbecoming of all members of this committee. So let's be diligent in the wording that we're using.
Thank you, Chair, and I would hope witnesses would be diligent in the words they use as well, in particular the correspondence between those words and the facts. This is a to use sanitized language. This is a point of misinformation that is of significant consequence for this file, because it seems that McKinsey was effectively able to infiltrate the government and shape decision making on many levels and benefit from that shaping of decision-making. And Mr. Barton's presence in and close relationship with the government allowed that to happen. I simply cannot square the fact that he has said that there was a recusal, there was a screen that prevented him from any dealings with McKinsey, that it was excommunicado in his testimony at OGO, and he repeated some of that testimony verbatim today. It is impossible to square that with the fact that we have emails in which a partner at McKinsey is facilitating a meeting involving Mr. Barton, and in the process has an intimate understanding of his schedule and availability. This is an obvious problem, and again, it is a problem of profound consequence because of the influence McKinsey has been able to exert over operational aspects of government and the significant increase we've seen in the money they've earned from government. And I'm also struck by the fact that McKinsey employees or former employees continue to come before various parliamentary committees and defend the alleged ethical track record of the company, when not only do we have these problems of conflict of interest, but we have McKinsey's record in the opioid crisis, their record assisting with the fingering of dissidents in Saudi Arabia, and various other scandals throughout the world. In the time I have left, Mr. Barton, I have one more question for you, which is, what other clients did McKinsey work for that have approved projects with the Infrastructure Bank?
Sorry, say that again. I don't understand your question.
Which other McKinsey clients had approved projects with the Infrastructure Bank? McKinsey did work for the Infrastructure Bank at the same time as they were prospectively working with clients who were trying to do business with the Infrastructure Bank. Which other clients do you work for in the private sector that have approved projects with the Infrastructure Bank?
Fortunately, we don't have time for that response. We're already at 4 minutes and 17
If
seconds.
Mr. Barton, could you provide that in writing?
Sure, happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barton, and thank you very much, Mr. Jennis. Next, we have Ms. O'Connell. Ms. O'Connell, the floor is yours. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Mr. Jennis should just read the blues from our previous meeting where McKinsey representatives said there were 0 of their clients that they worked for or that they advised on any Canada Infrastructure Bank project. So the blues will provide that testimony as well. Mr. Chair, I just want to go over a couple of points here. So when Mr. Jennis said that McKinsey had a close relationship with the government, I wonder which government, because it's very clear throughout this testimony that we saw that it was perfectly fine when then Minister Flaherty, then Prime Minister Harper worked with individuals, sought their advice, who also worked for McKinsey, who the government of Harper also provided contracts with McKinsey. So it just seems to be some sort of issue now that it's no longer a Conservative government in power, that they seem to have issue. There were 11 or 12 OGO meetings with all the same testimony, of which nothing has come from, because it has been determined that this is just, there is not a scandal here. But Conservatives who claim to have these so-called smoking gun emails with, wait for it, somebody knew Mr. Barton's availability for a meeting. That's it. That's the email they have. They don't have an email that McKinsey was in the room, that McKinsey is hosting this meeting, that McKinsey had any involvement. They have somebody knew that Mr. Barton had availability for a certain time. It's interesting because we as members get requested to hold meetings all the time. And our staff, I'm sure, often, I know mine do, say, oh, she's unavailable at that time. She might be available at this time. 2 consultants, 2 lobbyists who try to reach out and hold meetings with all of us, 2 stakeholders. And that's the big scandal that the Conservatives, after 4 meetings, and I find it interesting to accuse somebody of lying at this committee when Conservatives continue to ask the same question, the same response is provided, but it's not the response the Conservatives would like, therefore it's a lie. And I think it just goes to show Canadians that this really isn't about looking at the Canada Infrastructure Bank, the McKinsey studies, because it's demonstrated that there were 3 contracts with McKinsey. Today we heard testimony that it followed the procurement process. there were three other consultants, or three total consultants considered. McKinsey won that out. A total of $1.4 million. That's it. Hasn't been new McKinsey contracts. In comparison to the P3 Canada, which was a conservative infrastructure program, in 10 years they had 25 projects and a total of $1.3 billion of investments. In 5 years, the Canada Infrastructure Bank has had 46 projects, $9.7 billion of investment, but $27 billion worth of infrastructure. So clearly the work that the board did, not only in the restructure or the rethink or whatever you want to call it, clearly that work resulted in a significant amount of infrastructure being built across this country. Using a model to fill the gaps, we also heard testimony that these were some of the hardest projects to get going. We heard 450 buses for the city of Brampton would have, zero emission buses would have been impossible. Those were the words of Mayor Brown, would have been impossible to do without the Canada Infrastructure Bank.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Thank you very much. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barceau.
Next, we have Mr. Barceau-Duval. You have 2 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, I don't know I'll have enough time to bring up the facts that would contradict Ms. O'Connell, but I'll go in a different direction. But certainly if people want to look at the proceedings of the committee on May 11th, they can learn more about the McKinsey clients who benefited from the Bank of Infrastructure of Canada's contracts. Now, I have a hard time believing that McKinsey was just present at all of the steps of the process by chance, but my questions will focus on the pro bono work of McKinsey. Mr. Barton provided pro bono work, and his employees did as well for this Advisory Growth Council. And Mr. Barton, you said that you were there as a private individual and not as the president of McKinsey, but there were people from McKinsey supporting the work. I'm still trying to figure out the explanation for that. But I guess what I'd like to know is, when you commit a certain number of personnel to a project like this in a pro bono basis, so-called, I imagine that there is some tracking of the hours that they worked. So I'm wondering, how much did that cost McKinsey? What was the total number of hours and the cost to McKinsey of providing this pro bono work of all of these people to the bank?
So a couple of things I have to say is, again, if you're wondering again what the role was, it was to provide data at the request of Growth Council members. They weren't providing recommendations at all. They weren't in the room when any of the deliberations were occurring, and this was agreed to up front with the Deputy Minister and the Ministry of Finance, where we were doing this. So it was all
combien en valeur?
What was the value in dollars and in people?
I don't know. I have no idea what that was. That wasn't the point of it. It was just getting support. There was no cost benefit analysis that was done. It was.
Il y a des feuilles de temps, Monsieur Barton.
I mean, there would be records of that. People have timesheets and, budgets.
You should ask Mr. Pickersgill or Rob Halter. I have no idea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barton.
It wasn't relevant.
Thank you. And finally, for today, we have Mr. Bachrach. The floor is yours. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thank you to all of our witnesses. A lot of this discussion has focused on perceived conflict of interest, and I think the thing about perceived conflict of interest is a lot of it has to do with the perceiver, not necessarily the party that is being perceived. To Ms. O'Connell's point that these relationships were very similar under a Conservative government, I think points to the larger systemic issue, which is corporate capture when it comes to these infrastructure investments and the role of consulting companies and their clients and the individuals involved. I would go back to that Globe and Mail article from 2017. The journalist interviewed a source with extensive government and private sector experience in the infrastructure sector who was quoted as saying, "It does seem cozy and not typical of arm's length advisory processes." So there are certainly people who are looking at this whole advisory council, CIB, McKinsey situation and saying, it seems pretty cozy and not something that we would typically want to see when we're talking about billions of dollars of public money being spent. But my question is around risk transfer. And one of the main advantages that's often touted for public-private partnerships is the transfer of risk off of the public sector onto the private sector. And yet we see the bank involved in investments that transfer risk from the private sector onto the public sector. And so my question, perhaps through to Mr. Barton, is why should the public, why should Canadian taxpayers take on risk that the private sector isn't willing to bear?
20-second response, please, Mr. Barton.
I think the private sector does bear the risk by putting their capital into it. And we need to be able to find projects where they're willing to do it. And I think it leads to a better outcome. Having the private sector in there, I think, in fact, makes the project more viable. It requires that the analysis that is being done stands up to people being able to put money into it. So I think it actually is better from an overall risk point of view than just having the government do it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barton. And on behalf of all members of this committee, I'd like to thank our witnesses for appearing before us today. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.